resonance. Nikolai Voss had always joked that his crowning achievement was having 6 different species mispronounce his name in the same day. It wasn't much of an achievement, but when you're the only xenolinguist on a forgotten outpost at the edge of charted space, you take your victories where you can find them. Helix 7 wasn't ugly so much as aggressively utilitarian, a sprawling collection of modules and docking bays that resembled a child's building blocks assembled by someone with a concerning lack of artistic vision. The station hung in the shadow of a gas giant whose swirling storms cast an eerie violet glow through the reinforced viewports, bathing everything in perpetual twilight. Nikolai adjusted his wrinkled uniform jacket as he navigated the cramped corridors, dodging maintenance drones and harried technicians. His boots, standard issue with a non-standard squeak in the left heel, announced his approach long before he arrived anywhere. He'd meant to requisition new ones for months now, but somehow boots that don't sound like an asthmatic mouse never made it to the top of his priority list. Today was different. Today, he had a purpose beyond cataloging obscure dialectical shifts in the Ursan trade language or teaching the station's AI to recognize humor, a largely failed experiment that had resulted in the cafeteria displays occasionally flashing. That's what she said during meal announcements. "You're late," said Director Finn, not looking up from her console as Nikolai entered the briefing room. Finn was a stern woman with close-cropped gray hair and the perpetually exhausted expression of someone who had seen too many bureaucratic nightmares to maintain optimism. "Only by Helix Standard Time," Nikolai replied. "I'm early by at least 6 other cosmic calendars." "We use Helix time here, Voss," she said, finally glancing up. "And our guests are particularly sensitive to punctuality." "Guests?" Nikolai raised an eyebrow. "Helix 7 rarely received visitors beyond supply ships and the occasional lost explorer. It wasn't exactly a tourist destination, unless you were particularly fond of recycled air and synthetic protein cubes." Finn gestured to the door behind her. "The Etherian delegation arrived yesterday. They specifically requested someone with your qualifications." Nikolai tried not to look too surprised. The Etherians were notoriously reclusive, an ancient species known for their advanced psychometric abilities and complex language systems that defied conventional translation. They were also, as far as he knew, almost mythically rare to encounter in person. "What qualifications?" he asked. "My almost completed thesis on comparative xenophonetics. My charming inability to navigate social situations without making at least 3 diplomatic faux pas." "Your neural plasticity?" came a voice from behind him. Nikolai turned to find himself face to face with an Etherian. She, at least he assumed the gendered pronoun was appropriate, stood a head taller than him, with silver-white skin that seemed to ripple with subtle patterns of light beneath the surface. Her eyes were large, iridescent pools of lavender that reflected the room's light in hypnotic patterns. But most striking were her hands, encased in intricate gloves that hummed with a barely perceptible vibration. "I am Leora," she said, her voice melodic and strangely resonant, as if each word contained harmonies that human vocal cords could never produce. "I serve as interpreter of frequencies for the Etherian Conclave." Nikolai blinked, momentarily unable to form a coherent response. It wasn't just her otherworldly appearance that struck him speechless. It was the overwhelming sense of presence she projected, like standing too close to a subwoofer playing a note just below the range of human hearing. "Nikolai Voss," he finally managed, extending his hand reflexively before quickly withdrawing it. Etherians were known for their aversion to physical contact. "Sorry, I forgot about the touching thing." "The touching thing," Leora repeated, her head tilting slightly in what might have been amusement. "An elegant way to describe an evolutionary divergence that has shaped our entire civilization." Director Finn cleared her throat. "I'll leave you to it. The delegation has been assigned quarters in Section D. They've converted one of our conference rooms into a working space." She fixed Nikolai with a stern look. "Try not to cause an interstellar incident." After Finn departed, Nikolai was left alone with Leora, unsure of protocol or purpose. "You're probably wondering why we requested you specifically," Leora said, gesturing for him to follow her down the corridor. "The thought had crossed my mind," Nikolai admitted. "I'm not exactly the station's star employee. Last week I accidentally taught the recycling system to swear in Ursan when it processes certain plastics. Your accomplishments, or lack thereof, are irrelevant to our needs," Leora replied. "We require someone whose neural patterns have not been standardized by excessive technological interface. Someone whose mind still creates noise." "Well, I've been told my mind is exceptionally noisy, Nikolai said. Usually by people who are trying to concentrate. Leora led him through a series of corridors to a section of the station he rarely visited. The conference room had been transformed into something altogether different. The standard furniture had been removed, replaced by curved, organic-looking consoles that pulsed with soft light. The air smelled different too, cleaner, with an undercurrent of something like ozone and crushed mint. 2 other Etherians were present, both absorbed in manipulating holographic displays that shifted and reformed at the movement of their gloved fingers. They acknowledged Leora with subtle nods but paid Nikolai no attention. Our species communicates through resonance, Leora explained, moving to a central console that displayed what looked like a 3-dimensional waveform. Not just words or gestures, but the harmonization of neural frequencies. For millennia, this connection has sustained our collective consciousness across vast distances. She adjusted something on the display, and the waveform shifted, parts of it fragmenting and dissolving. But recently, the resonance has begun to degrade. Connections are breaking down. What was once a symphony has become discordant. Nikolai studied the display, though he understood little of what he was seeing. And you think I can help with this because human minds operate on different principles, Leora said. You think in patterns that our systems cannot predict. This unpredictability, this chaos, may be exactly what we need to identify the source of the degradation. So I'm basically a monkey with a wrench that you're hoping will accidentally fix your quantum radio, Nikolai summarized. For the first time, Leora's expression shifted into something recognizable as amusement. A crude but not entirely inaccurate assessment. She gestured to a seat beside the console. We will begin by establishing a baseline of your neural activity. Over the next few hours, Nikolai underwent a series of tests that made little sense to him. He was asked to translate obscure texts, solve puzzles with no apparent solution, recall childhood memories, and even hum melodies from his homeworld, all while surrounded by equipment that hummed and pulsed in response to his every thought. By the end of the day, his head throbbed and his eyes burned. But Leora seemed encouraged, her silver features animated with what might have been excitement. Your mind creates patterns unlike any we have encountered, she told him. There is a wildness to your thoughts, an unpredictability that our systems find difficult to categorize. I've been called wild before, but never quite like this, Nikolai said, rubbing his temples. Did any of that actually help? Leora gestured to the main display, where the waveform had stabilized somewhat. It did. Your neural patterns introduced new variables into our models. But we have much more work to do. Over the following weeks, Nikolai spent every day with the Etherians. The work was exhausting but strangely exhilarating. He found himself looking forward to the sessions, particularly those with Leora, whose initial coolness had given way to a curious warmth. He learned that the gloves the Etherians wore weren't just cultural artifacts, but necessities. Their species had evolved to share thoughts and emotions through direct contact, a gift that had become a curse as their civilization advanced. Touch had become too intense, too overwhelming, as their psychometric abilities developed beyond their biological capacity to filter input. So you've never touched anyone directly? Nikolai asked one evening as they worked late, the station quiet around them. Leora's gloved hands paused over the console. Not in the way you mean. Not skin to skin. Such contact would be overwhelming. Our nervous systems would attempt to synchronize, to share everything, every memory, every emotion, every secret thought. That sounds intense, Nikolai said, but also kind of beautiful. Beauty and terror often share the same face, Leora replied softly. We evolved beyond the need for physical connection, or so we believed. Perhaps we were wrong. On the 43rd day of their collaboration, everything changed. A team of Etherian archaeologists on the station had discovered an artifact, a small, crystalline sphere that pulsed with its own internal light. They brought it to the lab for analysis, believing it might be connected to their resonance issues. Nikolai watched as Leora and her colleagues examined it, their gloved hands moving cautiously around its perimeter. What is it? He asked. A memory node, Leora explained. Ancient, from the time before the severing, when our people still embraced direct connection. Can it help fix your resonance problem? Perhaps, if we can reactivate it. But it has been dormant for millennia. The node sat on a special pedestal in the center of the lab, occasionally flickering with faint pulses of light, like a heartbeat struggling to maintain rhythm. Nikolai found himself drawn to it, fascinated by the way it seemed to respond to the ambient sounds in the room, brightening slightly when he spoke, dimming when silent. Late that night, as he worked alone in the lab, Leora having been called away to consult with the other Etherians, the station's power grid suddenly fluctuated. The lights dimmed, emergency systems kicked in, and in that moment of chaos, the artifact began to pulse more strongly. Without thinking, Nikolai reached out and touched it. The world exploded into sensation. Colors he had no names for flooded his vision. Sounds became visible, light became tangible. He felt himself falling through layers of memory, not his own, but ancient, collective experiences. Births, deaths, discoveries, losses, all compressed into a single moment of overwhelming connection. And through it all, he felt Leora. Not just the Leora he knew, but all the versions of her across time. Her hopes, her fears, her solitude, her yearning for connection. When the power stabilized and the artifact went dormant again, Nikolai found himself on the floor, gasping. His hand tingled where it had touched the sphere, and his mind buzzed with fragments of memories he couldn't possibly possess. The door slid open, and Leora rushed in, her usual composure shattered. "What happened?" she demanded, then stopped, staring at him. "You touched it." Nikolai nodded, still trying to catch his breath. "I didn't mean to." The power flickered, and it started glowing, and I felt it, she whispered, her voice trembling. "I felt you. Your mind. Your memories." She took a step closer, her gloved hand hovering near his face but not touching. "That's not possible. The node should only respond to Etherian frequencies." Nikolai looked up at her, suddenly aware of a strange doubling in his perception, as if he could feel what she was feeling, hear the thoughts beneath her words. "Unless," she continued, her eyes widening with realization, "the problem was never with our technology. The problem was with us. We lost something, Nikolai. Something essential. And you think I can help you find it again?" Leora's gaze met his, and in that moment, he knew with absolute certainty that everything had changed. "Yes," she said, "but there is a price. There is always a price for connection." His hands still tingling with alien memories, Nikolai made a decision that would alter both their futures irrevocably. "Show me," he said. Harmony. Nikolai dreamed of starlight woven into hair, of memories that weren't his, of hands that could shape thought like clay. He dreamed of a world where touch was sacred, dangerous, and transformative, a world of crystal spires and harmonized minds joined across vast distances. He woke in the medical bay, blinking against harsh lights and the persistent beep of monitoring equipment. His head throbbed with each heartbeat, and when he tried to sit up, the room tilted alarmingly. "I wouldn't do that," came Director Finn's voice from somewhere to his left. "The medical team says your neural activity looks like a supernova having an identity crisis." Nikolai turned his head carefully, wincing at the stab of pain the movement caused. Finn stood by the door, arms crossed, looking even more exhausted than usual. "How long was I out?" he asked, his voice rough. 19 hours, she replied. "During which time the entire Etherian delegation has been in an uproar. 3 separate diplomatic channels have demanded explanations, and the station's power grid has been fluctuating like it's having a seizure." She moved closer, lowering her voice. "What exactly did you do, Voss?" The memories flooded back, the artifact, the power surge, the explosion of sensation, and Leora's face afterward, a mixture of wonder and terror. "I touched something I shouldn't have," he said simply. "Where is Leora?" "Sequestered with the other Etherians. They're not talking, at least not to us." Finn handed him a hydration pouch. "Drink this. Doctor's orders." Nikolai sipped the electrolyte solution, grimacing at its artificial sweetness. "There's something wrong with their resonance network, their way of communicating across space. They came here looking for help, and I think I accidentally found something." "Yes, by directly interfacing with an unknown alien artifact." "Very professional." Finn's tone was dry, but Nikolai could detect concern beneath the sarcasm. "Whatever you did, it affected more than just you. The station systems have been experiencing ghost signals, phantom data transfers. And the Etherians." She trailed off. "What about them?" "They're different. More animated. Almost agitated. Especially your friend, the interpreter." Nikolai swung his legs over the side of the bed, ignoring the protest from his equilibrium. "I need to see her. The medical team hasn't cleared you." They can't help with this, he said, standing shakily. No one on this station can. But I think I know someone who can. The Etherian quarters were guarded by two of their own sentinels, tall silver figures whose gloved hands rested on devices that might have been weapons or might have been scientific instruments. With Etherians, the distinction was often unclear. Nikolai approached cautiously, aware of a strange new sensation that had followed him since waking. A kind of background hum in his mind, like distant music played too softly to identify. I need to speak with Leora, he said, noticing how the guard's posture shifted at the sound of his voice, a subtle tension entering their frames. The interpreter is in communion, one replied, the words oddly resonant, as if speaking directly into Nikolai's thoughts rather than his ears. No outsiders may enter. I'm not exactly an outsider anymore, Nikolai said, and as the words left his mouth, he realized their truth. Something had changed within him, a fundamental shift in perception that he couldn't yet articulate. The guards exchanged glances, a silent communication passing between them. Then, without further protest, they stepped aside. The main chamber of the Etherian quarters had been transformed. The utilitarian station architecture was barely visible beneath a network of shimmering, translucent veils that seemed to capture and amplify the light. The air hummed with subsonic vibrations that Nikolai could feel in his bones. At the center, cross-legged on the floor, sat Leora. Around her, a dozen Etherians formed a perfect circle, all connected by slender filaments of light that emerged from their gloved fingertips. The memory node, the artifact Nikolai had touched, floated between them, pulsing with internal light that synchronized with their breathing. As Nikolai entered, Leora's eyes snapped open. The filaments connecting her to the others wavered but didn't break. You shouldn't be here, she said, but her voice held no admonishment, only concern. The resonance is unstable. I know, Nikolai replied, stepping closer. I can feel it. And he could. A dissonance in the harmony, a fraying at the edges of something vast and complex. The sensation was clearest when he looked at Leora, as if some invisible tether connected them across the room. One of the other Etherians, an elder with eyes so pale they were almost white, spoke in their native language, a cascade of musical tones that somehow, impossibly, Nikolai understood. The human carries the imprint. The node has recognized him. That's not possible, another protested, the translation flowing effortlessly into Nikolai's consciousness. The nodes respond only to Etherian resonance patterns. They always have. Leora rose gracefully, the filaments of light detaching from her fingers like threads of silk. And yet, it has happened. His mind now carries echoes of our collective memory. And I. She hesitated, her gaze meeting Nikolai's. I carry echoes of this. How? Nikolai asked, moving to stand before her. How am I understanding your language? How am I feeling things that aren't mine? The node created a bridge, Leora explained. When you touched it, it recognized something in your neural patterns, a resonance we didn't know humans could achieve. It mapped your consciousness onto its framework and, through it, connected you to our network. And to you specifically, added the elder, moving to examine Nikolai with ancient eyes. The node chose her as your anchor, the translator between your mind and our collective. Nikolai remembered the sensation of falling through memories, of feeling Leora's presence woven through them all. So we're what psychically linked. A crude approximation, Leora said, but essentially correct. Our consciousness now shares certain frequencies. The implications hit Nikolai all at once. That's why I can understand your language. I'm not translating it. I'm experiencing it directly through you. Leora nodded. And it explains why our resonance network has begun to stabilize. Your mind, unpredictable, chaotic, gloriously disorganized, introduced new patterns into our system. Patterns we had forgotten how to create ourselves. The elder Etherian moved closer, studying Nikolai with unnerving intensity. Our archives speak of a time when our species could forge connections with other minds, even those unlike our own. Before the severing, before we retreated into isolation behind our gloves and barriers. The severing? Nikolai asked. A choice made by our ancestors, Leora explained. As our psychometric abilities evolved, the intensity of direct connection became overwhelming. Rather than face that vulnerability, they developed technology to filter and control our experience. The gloves, the resonance network, the controlled environments. Over generations, we lost the ability to modulate our own sensitivity. You built walls, Nikolai said, understanding dawning. And forgot how to take them down. Until now, said the elder, turning to address the other Etherians. This human's mind has reminded the node how to forge raw, unfiltered connections. If we can replicate this pattern, we might restore what was lost. A murmur rippled through the assembled Etherians, a mixture of excitement and apprehension that Nikolai could feel as clearly as if it were his own emotion. Wait, he said, a sudden unease creeping up his spine. What exactly are you proposing? We must journey to Etheria Prime, the elder declared. To the origin sanctuary, where the first nodes were created. With your mind as template and Leora as conduit, we can recalibrate the entire network. And what happens to Nikolai in this process? Leora asked, a protective edge to her voice that surprised him. The elder hesitated, and in that hesitation, Nikolai found his answer. I'll be consumed, won't I? He said quietly. My consciousness used as raw material for your network recalibration. Not consumed, the elder corrected. Transformed. Your patterns would become part of our collective memory, preserved for eternity. But I wouldn't be me anymore. That is, uncertain. Leora stepped between them, her posture radiating a defiance that seemed to surprise even her colleagues. We will find another way. The human sacrifice is not required. The council has already decided, the elder said. The ship departs for Etheria Prime in 12 hours. The human will accompany us. After the other Etherians departed to prepare for the journey, Leora led Nikolai to a small meditation chamber where they could speak privately. The room was sparsely furnished, containing only a low table and cushions for sitting. The walls rippled with subtle patterns of light that responded to their emotional states, currently a turbulent mixture of blues and violets. I'm sorry, Leora said, settling across from him. This was not my intention when we requested your assistance. Nikolai ran a hand through his hair, still processing the elder's pronouncement. So to clarify, I accidentally touched an alien artifact, got my brain linked to yours, and now your people want to use me as a psychological template to reboot your entire species' consciousness. Did I miss anything? The situation is more complex than that. It usually is. He studied her face, noticing how her expressions had become more readable to him. The subtle shifts in her iridescent eyes, the micro-movements of her features. You don't agree with their plan. I believe there are alternatives, she said carefully. The elders see your mind as a tool, a means to recover what we've lost. But I have glimpsed your thoughts, your memories. There is more to you than chaos and unpredictability. There is. She paused, searching for the word, humanity. Generally considered my species' defining characteristic, Nikolai replied with a half-smile. You misunderstand. I refer not to your biological classification, but to the quality of your consciousness, your capacity for empathy, for connection despite difference, for finding meaning in imperfection. She looked down at her gloved hands. These are qualities my people have forgotten. Nikolai reached out instinctively, then stopped himself before touching her. Is there really no other way? Could we use the node differently? Find some middle path? Leora's gaze followed his arrested movement, lingering on his outstretched hand. Perhaps. The node responded to you in ways we didn't anticipate. Our understanding of its capabilities may be incomplete. Then we need to experiment, before your council turns my brain into a cosmic software update. He gestured to the node, which Leora had brought with them. Let me try again, but this time with guidance. She hesitated. It would be dangerous. The initial contact nearly overwhelmed your neural pathways. A second exposure could cause permanent damage. More permanent than being transformed into your collective consciousness. Point taken. She moved the node to the center of the table between them. But not alone. I will act as anchor and guide. How? In response, Leora slowly, deliberately removed her right glove, revealing a hand that was both familiar and alien, five-fingered like his own, but with skin that shifted with subtle patterns of light, as if her emotions played across her surface in visible waves. Direct connection, she said softly. Your mind to mine, with the node as intermediary. Together, we might discover possibilities the elders have not considered. Nikolai stared at her bare hand, understanding the significance of what she was offering. You said touch was overwhelming for your kind. It is, but our connection already exists. This would simply deepen it. And what happens if it's too much? If we both get lost in there? A faint smile crossed her features. Then we get lost together. Nikolai looked from her hand to the node and back again. Then, with a deep breath, he placed his left hand on the artifact and extended his right toward Leora. "Ready when you are," he said. Her bare fingers interlaced with his, and the world dissolved. This time, the connection was different, not a chaotic flood of sensation but a guided journey. Nikolai felt Leora's consciousness envelop his, creating a shared space where thoughts flowed between them like water finding its level. "Focus," her voice echoed in his mind. "See through my perception." The universe expanded around them, not as physical space, but as a vast network of interconnected minds. Nikolai saw, felt, the Etherean collective consciousness, billions of points of light joined by filaments of resonance. But the network was fragmented, sections dim or disconnected entirely, like a city suffering rolling blackouts. "This is what we've lost," Leora's thoughts conveyed. "The full harmony of our collective consciousness." Nikolai's perception shifted, zooming in on individual connections, examining their structure. "These pathways, they're all uniform, standardized," he observed. "Like they've been manufactured rather than grown." "Yes. After the severing, we rebuilt our connections artificially, precisely controlled to prevent overwhelming input." But that's the problem, Nikolai realized. Natural neural networks need variation, randomness, the ability to form unexpected connections. You've engineered all the chaos out of your system. As the realization formed between them, the node pulsed with renewed energy. Memories surged forward, ancient Ethereans touching freely, their consciousness rippling between them in waves of joyous connection. Children learning to modulate their sensitivity not through technology but through practice and guidance. A culture that embraced the messiness of direct experience rather than filtering it into sterility. "We can restore this," Nikolai's thoughts intertwined with Leora's. "Not by using me as a template, but by reintroducing the variables your ancestors engineered out, the capacity for direct, unmediated connection." "But how?" "The knowledge has been lost for generations." "Not lost," he corrected, directing their shared attention to the node itself. "Preserved." The nodes don't just store memories, they store the capacity for connection itself. They're not tools, they're teachers. Understanding bloomed between them like a flower opening to sunlight. The nodes weren't meant to be network components, but training devices, aids to help Ethereans learn to modulate their own sensitivity without technological barriers. As this revelation crystallized in their shared consciousness, the node began to transform. Its light changed frequency, pulsing in rhythm with their synchronized heartbeats. New patterns emerged within it, neural pathways mapping themselves in 3 dimensions. "It's reconfiguring," Leora's thoughts were tinged with wonder. "Adapting to our shared understanding." Not just reconfiguring, Nikolai realized. It's creating a template, a way to teach others what we've discovered. The possibilities unfolded before them. Ethereans were learning direct connection gradually, safely, using the recalibrated nodes as guides. A rebirth of their original capacity for unfiltered experience, but with the wisdom of ages to temper it. "This is what we've been seeking." Leora's joy radiated through their connection. "Not to return to the past, but to evolve beyond our current limitations." Their shared vision expanded further, encompassing futures neither had imagined alone. Ethereans removing their gloves not all at once, but in stages, relearning the subtle art of touch. Diplomatic missions to other species, including humans, founded on genuine connection rather than technological translation. A renaissance of Etherean art, music, and literature, fueled by direct emotional experience. And at the center of it all, the two of them, human and Etherean, different yet harmonized, pioneers of a bridge between worlds. The vision was so compelling, so complete, that neither noticed as the node's energy began to fluctuate wildly, its light pulsing in erratic bursts. Only when pain lanced through their joined consciousness did Nikolai realize something was wrong. The connection, it's destabilizing. Leora's thoughts were suddenly fragmented, distressed. Too much too fast, the node can't contain it. Nikolai felt her beginning to pull away, trying to protect him from the surging energy. "No," he projected fiercely. "Stay with me. We finish this together. If we don't break the connection, both our minds could be permanently damaged. Then we'll be damaged together. I'm not leaving you alone in this." Their consciousness had become too intertwined to separate cleanly. Any attempt to break the connection forcibly would tear their minds like fabric ripped along a seam. Instead, Nikolai did something reckless and human. He pulled Leora closer, both mentally and physically, embracing the chaos rather than fighting it. Their physical bodies, still seated across from each other in the meditation chamber, leaned forward until their foreheads touched, creating a third point of contact. The surge of energy flowed through them like lightning seeking ground, and for a moment that stretched toward infinity, they were perfectly, completely one. Not Nikolai and Leora, but a single consciousness that encompassed both and transcended either. In that moment of perfect union, the node found its equilibrium. Its light stabilized, pulsing with a new rhythm that matched their synchronized hearts. And then, gently, their consciousness began to separate, not torn apart, but carefully unfolded, like hands releasing after a long embrace. Nikolai gasped as awareness of his individual self returned, his hands still clasped in Leora's, his forehead still touching hers. The node between them glowed with steady, peaceful light. "Are you okay?" he whispered, his voice rough. Leora's eyes opened, meeting his from inches away. "I am transformed," she said softly. "As are you." He could feel it, a change in the fabric of his thoughts, as if his mind had been rewoven with threads of starlight. Not diminished, but enhanced, expanded to encompass perspectives no human had experienced before. "Will it fade?" he asked, reluctantly drawing back, though their hands remained joined. "Some aspects may integrate so completely you'll cease to notice them," she said. "Others will remain distinct gifts from my people to yours." A commotion outside the chamber drew their attention. The door slid open to reveal the elder Etherian, accompanied by several others, all staring at the transformed node with expressions of shock and wonder. "What have you done?" the elder demanded, though without the hostility Nikolai expected. There was awe in the ancient voice, and something like hope. Leora rose gracefully, still holding Nikolai's hand in her unloved one. "We have found another way," she said simply. "The human need not be sacrificed. The nodes themselves contain the knowledge we seek, not as technology, but as teachers." The elder approached cautiously, studying the node's transformed state. "This pattern, I have never seen its like." "Because it is new," Leora said. "Not a return to our past, but an evolution toward our future. A harmony of human chaos and Etherian order." The elder's gaze shifted to their joined hands, human and Etherian skin in direct contact, and widened with realization. "You have touched without barriers." "Yes," Leora said, her voice carrying subtle defiance. "And I remain myself, only more." The elder extended a trembling hand toward the node, stopping just short of contact. "If what you say is true, if the nodes can teach us to modulate our own sensitivity without technological barriers, then your people can reclaim what was lost," Nikolai finished. "Not all at once, but gradually, safely. The capacity for direct connection is still within you. It just needs to be reawakened." For a long moment, the elder was silent, thoughts visibly warring across ancient features. Then, with ceremonial slowness, the elder removed one glove and placed a bare hand on the node. The chamber filled with light, not the chaotic surge that Nikolai and Leora had experienced, but a gentle radiance that seemed to emanate from the elder's very being. When it faded, tears streaked the ancient face. "I had forgotten," the elder whispered. "The fullness of direct experience. The beauty of unfiltered connection." The elder looked up at Leora and Nikolai, wonder replacing skepticism. "The council must see this. All of our people must know what you have discovered." The voyage to Etheria Prime took place as planned, but its purpose had been transformed. Instead of traveling as a sacrifice, Nikolai went as a partner, a co-discoverer of the path forward for the Etherian people. The planet itself was even more beautiful than he had glimpsed in Leora's memories, a world of crystalline cities and luminous oceans, where the very atmosphere seemed alive with the resonance of billions of connected minds. In the Origin Sanctuary, a vast chamber beneath the ancient city of First Harmony, Nikolai and Leora presented their discovery to the High Conclave, 12 elders whose combined wisdom guided the Etherian people. The recalibrated node was placed in the center of a circular platform, surrounded by dozens of dormant nodes retrieved from archives across the planet. As Nikolai and Leora demonstrated their discovery, touching the node together, sharing their harmonized consciousness with the conclave, the dormant nodes began to awaken, one by one, their light synchronizing with the pattern they had created. "A renaissance," proclaimed the eldest of the conclave, voice trembling with emotion. "A return to our true nature, not as isolated points of light, but as a living web of shared experience." The implementation would take time, generations, Perhaps. But the path forward was clear. The Etherians would relearn the art of direct connection, guided by the recalibrated nodes, and the unique harmonic pattern created by human chaos and Etherian order intertwined. Later, standing on a balcony overlooking the crystalline spires of First Harmony, Nikolai and Leora watched three suns set in sequence, casting the world in shifting colors. "I never asked what happens next," Nikolai said. "For us, I mean. Once your people start this renaissance, once the nodes are distributed and the training begins." Leora turned to him, her unloved hand finding his with practiced ease. In the weeks since their first direct connection, touch between them had become natural, necessary, a constant reaffirmation of the bridge they had built between worlds. "That depends," she said, "on what you want." "I want." Nikolai looked out at the alien sunset, then back to her face, now as familiar to him as his own reflection. "I want to see where this leads. Not just the Etherian Renaissance, but us. This connection we've created." "As do I," she said simply. "The station will wonder where I've gone. Director Finn probably thinks I've been ceremonially sacrificed by now." Leora smiled, a full, unrestrained expression that would have been impossible for her before their connection. "We can return to Helix 7, if you wish. Or remain here. Or travel elsewhere entirely. The Conclave has appointed me Ambassador of Harmony, the first of a new diplomatic corps trained in direct connection with other species." "Ambassador Leora," Nikolai said, testing the title. "It suits you." "As does Interpreter Voss," she replied. "The Conclave wishes to offer you a formal position as well. Interpreter not just of language, but of humanity itself. To guide us as we relearn to connect beyond our own kind." Nikolai laughed softly. "From failed xenolinguist to interspecies diplomat. My graduate advisor would never believe it. And yet, here you are." Leora's free hand rose to touch his face, a gesture that once would have been unthinkable for her kind. "The first human an Etherian has ever truly touched." "And the last?" he asked, only half joking. "The first of many," she corrected, "but always the most significant." As the final sun slipped below the horizon, casting the world in twilight, their minds touched as easily as their hands. No node required, no technology mediating the connection. Just two beings who had found harmony across the void of difference, creating something new and beautiful in the space between stars. I can feel your thoughts, Nikolai murmured. You're happy. Yes, Leora said simply. And you? In answer, Nikolai drew her closer, forehead touching hers in the gesture that had become their private ritual. The connection between them bloomed like a flower opening to starlight, separate consciousness harmonized but not dissolved, different but no longer divided. I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be, he replied. And across the vast distance of space, on stations and planets and ships between the stars, the first reverberations of their discovery began to spread, a new frequency of connection that transcended the boundaries between species. A harmony born from the courage to reach across the void and touch another mind without fear. A frequency of touch that would, in time, transform worlds.